Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha, and I like talking about American presidents. And I just wanted to add a final word regarding the unconstitutional deportations, which have uh, been undertaken by some of our presidents, from President Herbert Hoover with the Mexican repatriation that occurred during the era of the Great Depression from 1929 to 1936, when from 300 to 2 million Mexican Americans, they were American citizens, at least 60% of them were forced to coerced to self-deport due to the hostile conduct of state actors. And also in more recent times, with the zero tolerance policies by President Donald Trump and the ICE raids just raiding uh, Mexico, raiding communities of color, especially Hispanic communities, and with the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which has become a cause celeb. These are unconstitutional deportations. He had been deported to El Salvador and brought back, even though he's a U.S. national. So, what's triggered? The rights that are triggered. That's just what I wanted to talk about. I'd done earlier videos in which I was discussing, presidents and past presidents and immigration policies. So when there's a raid and an concerning immigration, immigration is not a Sixth Amendment issue. Immigration is actually a civil case, and it's an administrative matter within the jurisdiction purview of the executive arm of government. So it doesn't trigger a Sixth Amendment right. So because it's a civil case. So if you're charged with a crime, your Sixth Amendment rights are triggered, right? So you have a right to know your charge, a right to counsel, right? Um, a right to a jury of your peers, a right to a public trial. That's with regard to a criminal case, and that's where what Sixth Amendment uh, covers. And then you have a right to a speedy trial. You have a right to counsel if you can't, afford a lawyer. The state provides you a lawyer. You can use a public defender. However, the challenge for the immigration cases and the coerced deportations is that it's not a criminal case. However, it does have Fifth Amendment protections, and the Fifth Amendment deals with due process of law. And so one still has a right to receive notice, to have for fairness in the proceedings, to be heard in a court of law, to have an opportunity to respond. So you have limited protections, right? And so the Fifth Amendment due process, and of course, substantive due process as well. Those are protected. So that's protecting fundamental liberties, your life, and so they can't go and lock you up in a detention center and and kill you or torture you. So those have to do with fundamental rights, substantive due process. You still have a right to dignity and things like that if you're put in a detention center, and you still have habeas corpus, right? Um, you should be able to appear in court to defend yourself. Um, so the Fifth Amendment rights are the protections that are provided regarding these deportation cases and immigration cases. Um, in addition, uh, I actually decided to go and look up the case of Abrego Garcia. I looked him up because he lives in Maryland as well. And so I looked him up, and because I I just gotten curious and looked up, his case, and it had said about that as of the time he first got arrested a few years ago, he had no criminal case. He'd never been convicted or charged with a criminal offense. I looked him up, and it turns out it is true. Um, in the Maryland case search, he has just one civil domestic case that was dismissed. That's the only thing he has, and he has a right to actually have that expunged from the record since it was dismissed. You still have a right to defend yourself because it would turn out to be defamation. You still have a First Amendment right. A First Amendment protects you from defamation, right? Although it's a civil matter as well, so you can sue for defamation because you don't want uh, uh, a published misrepresentation that damages your reputation and character. For instance, what I've experienced, you're when somebody accusing you of something, right? That's just one person's word. That person might be delusional making the accusation. It might be coerced by cops, which we know happens in Maryland. Maryland's cops are very corrupt and dirty. For instance, just because I've experienced this, I was in my home when I was swatted, and a neighbor I'd never talked to. This guy can't even speak a word of English. He's a criminal. I think he's Ethiopian. I don't know who he is. I've just seen him. He's a very irresponsible person, because I see he's an alcoholic. He drinks, he pukes in the hallway, he litters the place, and I've never spoken with him. It turns out Jide Wari, the demented man who impersonated himself as my uncle, that the Department of Navy used to file a perjured emergency evaluation petition. Jide Wari came with him. So Jide Wari has, because I don't know how he was getting into my building. This Jide Wari guy, um, I've done videos discussing, my incident, what happened, how I was a victim of a swatting and falsified police charges in order to prevent me from filing a lawsuit and to obstruct justice. So, so Jide where I came with this guy, and they both, him and one other guy, there were three of them, and they grabbed me, they assaulted me at my doorstep, right? And and I never responded. I never retaliated. I never touched them. I just screamed when they assaulted me in my doorway because Jide were apparently that was what I thought. He had been upset because I told him not to come to my home, and I dropped the phone on him because he had called me. But he falsified information. He subsequently said it was the police that called him and said they needed him to get me out to a hospital, that I'd been in a fight. All of this was fabricated, that I was in a fight with a neighbor. All of this was fabricated. Jide Ware and his wife, they told me before that they had friends in my building, who live in my building, and they're Ethiopians. This guy is Ethiopian, so they probably connived together and got this Ethiopian guy to come and help Jide Ware to assault me or something. I don't know, but they did it with the collaboration of the police. Because while after the police came and assaulted me during the swatting, tased me, shot me with a taser dart in my head, and I was receiving stitches, I was at the hospital. A sheriff brought me a peace order. When I read the peace order, I saw it was fabricated. Right? I didn't know who the guy was, and interestingly, a guy I'd never spoken with knew my name, knew my age, my date of birth. Somebody I'd never spoken with. So he did something, he committed perjury, and then he fabricated everything in the peace order. The person who had assaulted me with Jide Wari went to lie. So the police suborned him to go and write the fabrication to prevent me from going back to my apartment. Because they'd done things in my apartment. They'd spiked my apartment with drugs, laced my food, right? Done stuff, used some kind of narcotic. The police had already stolen my property, my wristwatches, my cash, my certificate of naturalization, and then they also stole certain government classified documents, right? They stole certain, because I was working in the classified section. So that's one of the ways I knew it was the Department of the Navy. Because when I reported to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, they didn't care, because they should normally be concerned that, oh my God, the public has classified documents that I was legitimately holding in my home. It was the government that gave me these documents to hold. And I was raided and it was removed. That's one of the ways that I know that, okay, it was the Navy, it was the government that did this. They did it to cover up and to block the investigation of fraud that I'd reported to Office of Special Counsel and Inspector General's office. And they removed my naval access card. Nobody would touch that Navy because, and the Navy didn't care. That naval access card is what gets me into the building, a Washington Navy Yard, so I can go into the building. And they didn't care that, oh, somebody had access, somebody had their access card, somebody had some classified documents that were in my apartment. They didn't care about those things, which they gave to me. I had them lawfully, right? Because they removed them themselves, and then they now coerced my neighbor to file a fabrication, a perjured peace order to prevent me from going back to my apartment. You know, so what I'm saying is that from my experience, the fact that Montgomery County police officers, Maryland state police officers are corrupt, they're liars, they're criminals. They have criminals wearing uniform, carrying badges, carrying guns on taxpayer money. The fact that they can fabricate stuff and do ex parte orders, they have judges like a corrupt Judge Bibi Berry and corrupt Judge James Bonifant. They can fabricate ex parte orders, because I never appeared in court to defend myself against the delusion of the criminal neighbor, Germa Shumi, who had assaulted me and then told a lie, a complete lie. I never got to appear in court. When I was released, so I was wrongfully detained. When I was now released, I went to court and there was a good judge. The judge heard me. I told him, look, everything this guy said is a fabrication. And so he told me, okay, how to go about it. Go and report it to the police, which I did. He said, go and file with the state attorney's office, which I did. But the state attorney's office just keeps doing a run around and all that, trying to protect the cops. So you know that the Department of Navy and Department of Defense co-opted the Maryland judiciary and the cops. They've been committing fraud on the courts, just telling fabrications. So because it happened to me, I realized that when I went to research this Abrego Garcia guy, and I saw on Wikipedia it said that he'd never been charged with a crime prior, and he was initially picked up, so he was racially profiled for loitering when he was there are places in Maryland that minorities stand where, like, labor ready, where they can get construction work immediately by the day, right? And this is probably what they were doing according to the Wikipedia thing. But they were arrested and locked up because they're nativist xenophobes in Maryland right now. There's that backlash where people are saying, well, hardworking immigrants, right, who've come here to work, who are law abiding, they're nativists who are targeting them. They're jealous, and there's that reprisal. It's just like me, right? I had just been given a six-figure job. I mean, I didn't go and get 5 degrees for nothing. Even if I don't work in America, I'm an American citizen. I can work globally because of my credentials, right? And it turned out there were just people who were envious, for instance, of my position, of my job, right? And they just wanted to retaliate against me, to discredit me, to damage my record. And this is probably something that I don't know this Abrego Garcia from anywhere, but I'm somebody who empathizes. I hate injustice, right? Today's Sunday. I'm a Christian, and part of my faith is we are against injustice, right? That's what America is supposed to be about. America is supposed to be opposed to injustice. And now we have government officials, state actors, Many of these people are not qualified. Like the cops in Maryland, they're the worst. And this Abrego Garcia guy, it started with Maryland cops. I would not be surprised if half of Maryland's cops are criminals, are actually closeted criminals, right? I would not be surprised. And so they charged this guy with a crime. He's never had his day in court. He's been detained for years. He's been deported. Those are violations of his Fifth Amendment due process. Now, in his immigration case, right, that's he doesn't have Sixth Amendment protections, right? He has Fifth Amendment protections. He's still entitled to procedural due process. He's entitled to substantive due process. However, because he has he at some point they accused him of being part of MS-13, so that's a criminal case attached, right? Um, he is entitled to he has some Sixth Amendment rights as well. So he has a right to a counsel, right to a speedy trial for that, right to a public trial for the criminal case. But even from what I read in the papers, it says that his attorney have indicated that the case presents a prima facie case of vindictive prosecution because he's denied being a member of MS-13. You know, they have no proof of this, and it looks like that might be dismissed. So it's concerning and it's very troubling what's going on in America. There's this xenophobia going on and racism. It's very redolent of what was going. I know we don't. It's we normally don't want to compare everything to Nazism, so to appear not to appear that we're minimizing the atrocities of the Nazi era, but when something, as they say, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, you gotta call it what it is, a duck. It's acting the way it is. Right now, the authoritarianism, the xenophobia, the abuse of the is like we've entered a state of autocracy that's just it's it's so redolent. It's of the Nazi era, the Gestapo tactics of Nazis, right? The Stalinist um, troikas, where they use bill of attainder. In America, if they charge you with a crime, you're entitled to your day in court. It's just an accusation. There are people who are delusional, who doesn't know they're crazy people in America, make false accusations. Many of these cops, like the cop who wrote the charges against me, I didn't even see it. The cop is delusional, thinks they're a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist who eventually evaluated me for my competency to stand trial said, no, that I don't have any mental illness. They don't see anything, right? They laughed at the cops. Yeah, this cop a psychiatrist? The cop goes that this person has an undiagnosed thought disorder. A cop, if I don't know the cop, I'd never met him. Trying to cover up what they did. They came, locked me up in my home, falsely imprisoned me. Then one wrote a police report saying that I was acting erratic. Spelled, I suppose the person was trying to say erratic. Wrote Erradic, erratic. You should not let a cop who can't spell erratic, speaks only one language, English, apparently, and cannot write English properly. You should not let them uh, be deluded enough. You shouldn't give them the authority to act like they're a psychiatrist, right? Demarcus Coleman, I don't know if he has a high school diploma. I mean, the high schools in America, public high schools, they're not worth it anyway in America. You can see he can hardly write. He's semi-literate, Demarcus Coleman, and he's a cop. going to arrest people that are smarter than him, more educated than him, more civilized, more decent than him. This guy goes and writes that he attempted to make content. Of course, he was lying. So the psychiatrist who was reading, who was doing my competency to stand trial evaluation, which I shouldn't have had in the first place, right? It was conclusory for the judge to give to order a competency to stand trial. There's some states that a judge can just arbitrarily order a competency to stand trial if he believes if he thinks there's something off. That's like Florida. Maryland is not one of those states. So Judge James Bonifant committed fraud on the court with the police. They committed fraud on the court to force a competency to stand trial evaluation. And this same judge abuses it. There's a woman who's accused of murdering her daughters, Catherine Hogle. This judge is the same one who found this woman incompetent to stand trial, preventing, wasting state resources. James Bonifant, he's a crooked judge, incompetent and crooked judge. So DeMarcus Coleman writes that he attempts to make content with is a suspect, or I don't even know what he wrote. And then the psychiatrist who's reading it is sitting down thinking, what does this mean? What has he written? And I said, I think maybe he's trying to say he tried to make contact, He said, huh? And he was laughing. A semi-literate guy, a cop. These are the incompetent people that you're giving guns to go and kill Americans. They fabricate things. They lack character. They lack integrity. The law enforcement in Maryland, they should overhaul it. The federal government should investigate them. The court system, because they're violating the rights of American citizens. I'm an American citizen. I have no business with the state of Maryland. I was there because I was working for the Pentagon with the Department of Defense. That's all. That's the only reason. I have no business with the state of Maryland, right? Maryland is one of those states anyway. Their history, so it's so funny. It's something atavistic that's going on there, because they're one of those states that it had been a semi-penal colony, right? Apart from because when they gave them the state of Maryland was given a proprietary charter by the King of England back then, King of Britain, and yeah, where had they become Great Britain? Anyway, King of England, and so some of the people that were sent there they had an experiment. They actually sent criminals, prisoners, convicts, right? Terrible people there to the state of Maryland. And of course, it was bad because the English church was against Catholics, right? So they were trying to expel Catholics from England. So it was, they let Catholics, anyway, let me not go into that. But it's kind of funny how the state of Maryland is it's not a state I would, I'd be glad to go to, right? Because, their history is just it's not laudable. And it's funny how they try and criminalize their decent law-abiding citizens, because that's what they try to do to me. I'm a law-abiding citizen. If you go and take a sample of the people I associated with, everybody will say I'm a law-abiding person. Then they now brought somebody I'd never spoken with. And the funny thing is, Germa Shumi is a criminal. He doesn't have a criminal record in Maryland, but they've charged him, and I've been waiting. He's a criminal. He can't speak a word of English. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is America, right? If you want to come to America, you should be able to speak English. You should be able to learn. You should make an effort. I speak several other languages myself. I'm an immigrant myself. I speak other languages. You should make an effort to be able to speak your host nation's language, right? You should make an effort. And this guy's a criminal, he's a thug, he's a liar. And the FBI has not investigated him and asked, okay, what's going on? Right? Because they were covering up for somebody from Maryland, Montgomery white females who committed, I've reported for fraud and reported them for fraud and misconduct, and they're covering up for them. In any event, I've personalized this. Well, it's a parallel, and I'm the objective is I'm also using my instance, right, my situation as an example for other people, right, for people to learn. Because one, it's shocking me. When injustice is happening to one person, it affects everybody, our whole society. And fortunately, it's a different society we have now. Social media is available to break the monopoly of the co-opted or the venal corporate media, right? That doesn't care about the little person, doesn't care about general Americans. All they care about is a dead billionaire crook, pedophile, right? How does that's all they do these things to distract from the main thing. Every day, all the corporate media, they keep talking about a dead man who was a pedophile. His victim, the main victim who outed him, is late as well, right? It's a terrible thing. But how does that put uh, food on the table of the average American? The 24/7 news cycle on this dead pedophile billionaire. How does it put food on the table? They fixated on, is it supposed to get Donald Trump out? You just keep wanting to see these Epstein files. Is it going to get Donald Trump? You're not going to impeach him. You've tried, he's been impeached twice. Even if he's impeached, he's not going to be removed from office. It's been done twice. You keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? And you're not learning from it. It's like, what do you call that? That's just foolishness. The foolishness of corporate media, the silliness, the silliness, and it's so funny the level of people that engage in the shenanigans, the circus. Now that's what Congress indulges in. The whole of Congress, everybody's, these are elderly people. People lack wisdom. You see elderly people in America who should be responsible acting like children. You know, there are high costs of living. There's high unemployment. How are the Epstein files know? How is any of that? How is any of that going to put food on Americans' table? How is that going to pay for Gen Z's college education? How is it going to provide employment? How is any of that? The amount of time Americans waste on limited resources, the wastefulness, and this was what I saw in the Department of the Defense, Department of Navy. I was stunned. I was working at one time, and they just sat down. They were watching television, and that was what they were afraid of because I was working. Somebody once told me that the only way you could get fired in the federal government is if you work hard. And I'd never in my life gone to work somewhere before, and there were lazy people. They were actually people I thought they were incompetent. They didn't know their job. It was the first time I experienced this was in the federal government, the Department of Defense. In America, I've now lived most of my life in America. This is where I've worked. Private sector, I didn't know. It was the first time in the Department of Defense, Department of the Navy. And I see why when I worked in the bank, I had a boss. He was a senior vice president, and he used to make these disparaging comments all the time. That if doesn't want to work, if they're incompetent, if they're whatever, they should go to work for the government. And I just think this is so unfair. But from my experience, from what I've seen, the amount of resources that have been wasted by the judiciary, oh my God, at least in Maryland's public service in the DMV area, no wonder they call it the Beltway corruption. It is astonishing. It is astonishing the amount of corruption, lack of integrity, lack of character. the oh my gosh, I'm not even going to go into that. My objective was to talk about the rights, the laws that are invoked uh, under the immigration raids. So it's substantive due process. In the case of Abrego Garcia, because he was charged separately with a crime, which appears to, they said, it presents a prima facie case of prosecutorial vindictiveness. Um, so it's going to be dismissed, but he still has Sixth Amendment rights regarding that. He has a right to a speedy trial, to a fair trial, public trial by jury, if that criminal case goes forward. But it's understood that it's probably not going to. So when they say prosecutorial vindictiveness, that's actually it's a bad faith prosecution, and it can amount to prosecutorial misconduct. From my personal case in Maryland, I see there is, they don't care. It's something the ABA, the Bar Association, is supposed to penalize the the prosecutor for misconduct. There's supposed to be a misconduct complaint, but it's unfortunate that um, the bar seems to be an old boys network, and so one person's doing it. It's probably a bunch of them are probably all doing the same thing, and they probably just wink. They just the offending attorney probably just gets a slap on the wrist um, for prosecutorial misconduct in Maryland. Um, I guess it depends on the state. Those who do get disbarred for certain things, it's probably so outrageous in the media and they can't cover it up, or they're probably scapegoating somebody. From what I'm seeing, because there's been a prosecutorial misconduct, judicial misconduct, police misconduct in my situation. I'm an innocent man sitting in my home who was raided and injured wrongfully based on false allegations, fabricate, not even false, falsified accusations to cover up, to obstruct justice. And then I ended up being, you know, injured severely, almost killed by cops. They came, the way I was tasered, it was like they were trying to kill me. So I had insult to injury. I was charged, so that's prosecutorial misconduct, police misconduct. A judge who looks at it, because till today, 3 years, almost 3 years, there's no evidence showing that I assaulted any cop. It only shows cops assaulting me. The only body cam that's available is cops assaulting me, injuring me, dehumanizing me, almost killing me. That's even attempted murder, right? So a judge should have looked at the evidence, dismissed it. A prosecutor should have said, "What? It's not been indicted, right? It's just information." My attorney stood up in court and said, "Hey, we don't have any evidence of what these people are saying. Where's the evidence? It's just the police saying it by word, right? The cops lie. These are cops who can't spell erratic. I mean, who can't spell erratic? Who write erratic? Who can't write a sentence?" Uh, I think people who do, people who take their time to educate themselves. This is America. The opportunities in America. People who take their time, are disciplined enough and make the sacrifice to educate themselves. I think they demonstrate a certain level of integrity, right? Discipline, resourcefulness, and character. Those who don't in America, and they're doing jobs they're required, and they don't have a conscience that, well, they should quit this job because it's not for them. They're not qualified to do it. Um, it speaks volumes, right? It speaks volumes. Um, so yeah, so people who people who've been raided under the immigration laws for immigration reasons, they do have Fifth Amendment protections as well. They have due process, habeas corpus, even if they're non-citizens, as Hamden versus Rumsfeld, determined. Even if they've been accused of terrorism, and this is America. We're still a model for the world. And I think it's really about time that the Department of Justice starts addressing, criminality, criminal conduct, misconduct in states' criminal justice systems, because, and the carceral system. It's it's really, really pathetic what's going on, because when they lock you up, when they hold you in the penal system, you can die. In fact, somebody just there's somebody in Montgomery County where I was wrongfully detained who just recently died. I think a couple of days ago. Who died while I was detained. Four people apparently committed suicide. Four people. These are people who just under detention, and you're being held with people who are crazy. You have a cellmate who might can kill you. You risk your lives. The inmates, some of them have all sorts of communicable diseases, all sorts of illnesses, and you have the risk of getting an infection, an illness, or something, right? Being held. Yeah, oh my God. But anyway, I have a book to write about this. The horrendous experience I've had. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.